switch it off.
Yeah,
like usual.
yeah. All right. Hey everyone, welcome to Driving Green. We're back. Sorry for the delay. Life's been exciting for all of us here, and there's a lot to cover. This is going to be an episode about American Battery Technology Company, so I'm going to fire up the disclaimer now. All three of us are paid advisors to this company. Nothing that we speak about on this show is reflective of the company's official position. We actually don't know a lot of what's going on in the company, and things that we do know about, we're actually not allowed to talk about. So everything we talk about here is not some secret message to signal what's going to be in the company's future. It's our own personal thoughts. Nothing in this show is investment advice or legal advice or any other sort of advice. It's just our incoherent rambling over here. And we're just here to talk about the exciting things that this company is going through right now. So yeah, ready to start. How are you guys feeling today, Kyle and Kevin?
Good. I mean, it's been a while. The three of us haven't really sat down and had a good conversation in a hot minute.
That's for a fact. I'm probably the one most to blame since I've actually moved locations about 800 miles from north to south, and then that
California.
Still in California, but still moved from north to south. So you could say that that's pretty much thrown a big wrench in a lot of things, at least for us.
Yeah, but glad everything's worked out for you, and I'm glad we can all be back over here. So yeah, what is the most burning topic on your minds today that you're excited for, or you want to talk about?
Conditional use permit.
Ooh.
That's a spicy one.
We've been waiting for so long. So for everybody, I'm sure is keenly aware, back in May, the permit committee in Fernley approved the conditional use permit 7 to 0. So unanimous approval. However, this upcoming week, I think in 3 days, is it the 16th? They will be voting again, but this time it's the city council, right? And they'll be the final rubber stamp. If American Battery is to build in Fernley, they will need to get this approval. So all eyes are going to be watching that. So I guess we have to stay tuned. I'm confident. I'm optimistic, but yeah, still exciting.
To get a 7-0 recommendation in May was amazing when you consider that to get 7-0, everyone unanimously has to approve of building the plant. And there's, people on all sides of the political spectrum representing that committee. And if you actually listen into the call, like the 200, 300 plus people on Discord and on Facebook that were listening on that call live, it was a great watch party. We were listening to a committee meeting over various recommendations with new apartment housing. And
if you have not listened to a Fernley planning committee meeting with 50 to 100 other people on Discord, you have never lived. So go to the Reddit, the American Battery, I think it's ABTC stock Reddit page. There's a Discord. Get in the Discord and participate in the next meeting, because that was very entertaining.
Shout out
I will have to say I unfortunately missed it because I was moving, and I'm very sad about that. I was truly very sad.
Kevin's excuse to disengage with life, like the last month and a half. He was moving.
Okay. You guys, I don't know about you guys, but moving takes a lot.
Yes.
No, but in all honesty, to build upon it, for all our listeners, you have to understand, getting this kind of approval with this kind of support is a huge vote of confidence. I know we have another one coming up, but essentially, I mean, we can bring up a lot of examples that have recently occurred in the overall US where lithium recycling was blocked, or some kind of injunction was blocked against lithium mining. But again, this kind of unanimous support is a big vote of confidence for ABTC.
Yeah, so I mean, in New York, SungEel, they had been, I think, in talks for months, if not years, to acquire this old IBM chip manufacturing plant in order to convert it into a battery recycling facility. And I'm not super privy to their process and the risks to the community, but the community basically chased them out of out of the area. They gave up and said, we're not going to build here. We're not going to take over this plant. We won't come to your community. And then, you know, furthermore, you've got stuff like I think it was in Massachusetts, the recycling facility that had a lithium ion fire because somebody threw a battery into the recycle bin, and it went to a corrugated cardboard facility and burst into flames. So a lot of people have this fear of lithium ion batteries, and for good reason, right? Like, they are volatile in nature, and so if companies are not prepared to handle them safely, or if they're going to deconstruct them in a manner that might put off emissions in the general community, like that gives them good reason to be skeptical. So going back to the planning committee, you know, there were a lot of questions that were expected because of for lack of a better word, and I mean this in all respect, like the ignorance of, it could mean anything when you say battery recycling, right? Like, you can burn it, you can, you know, shred it, you can, you know, do all these different things. And what does that mean for me living 2, 3, 5, 10 miles away from this place? So they were asking all the right questions, and I think it really speaks to the company's attempt to do a lot of outreach ahead of time and really get people on the same page about what they are and what they are not.
Yeah,
Wow.
definitely.
Absolutely. And, you know, and that's something not to be underscored and to take lightly, given the fact that there are failures elsewhere where companies have not taken that support, where companies have not taken those proactive positions, have not, or probably don't have the same kind of technological process or ways of thinking that would minimize risk. And so, so in many ways, this is a very good early indicator of what ABTC is all about.
And let's just contrast that with the committee meeting for those of us who couldn't attend, right, Kevin? So like,
wow,
there was, when they opened it up to public comment, like 90% of the comments from the people living in the city were very positive towards it. Even the expert advisory in that committee meeting, that guy was very positive towards it.
Yeah, I think he was from NDEP, the
yeah.
Nevada Department of Environmental Protections, I think.
Yeah, and you know, shout out Debbie, hero of all of us at ABTC here.
Daphne Hooper.
Daphne.
Wow, Ron. For someone who attends the meetings, can't we get names right here?
Hey. So yeah,
it is hard to get those systems. I mean, I can empathize. They probably didn't have anybody on site to work those Zoom calls, and man, the systems can get nasty.
Yeah, so great night all the way around, and I believe we find out about the plant being finalized on June 16th, right?
Yeah, I believe that's it. And if it's not, I will be flashing a disclaimer on the screen that we are wrong, and it's this other date. So,
we'll join us in the Discord watch party for June 16th. It's gonna get lit, everyone.
It's pretty fun.
I will be there this time.
All right.
Cool. What else? It's been well over a month, I think, since we last had a pod. So
yeah. So I think the next thing, really quickly, probably not as exciting. Filed an uplisting application for the NASDAQ. A
formal application. So it's really in NASDAQ's hands.
And the share price has to be what, above $2 average for a month?
It depends. I don't think anybody, the company has not publicly stated what method they are going to uplist. I think some of it is at the discretion of the NASDAQ. I believe, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but having dug through everything, I believe you have to stay above $2 for 90 days for it to be, eligible if you want to use that particular method. Or I think you can, if you get to $3, you have a much shorter runway that you have to do it by. So I don't know if it'll matter if they have to, if they don't get approval back in 90 days and they have met that requirement, then so be it. But if they hear back sooner and it needs to be a 3, they might have to wait, But I'm no expert, and I think that there's a lot of running theories.
So that's just a small technicality thing. And then finally, I think in terms of major recent developments, ABTC has been fairly active in terms of acquiring land and water resources. So in terms of company developments, those are probably the topmost items.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that the land acquisition is pretty interesting and exciting. The company hasn't really made it abundantly clear what they're planning on putting there. There's a lot of theories about what could be there, but I don't think it's helpful to like speculate. So I guess we'll just have to stay tuned with everybody else. But yeah, I mean, I think the NASDAQ uplisting is exciting. They've mentioned to us previously that the reason that it's a priority for them in 2021 is so that they can get access to institutional investors that otherwise have signaled to them that they're really excited about the company, the process, the technology, their business plan, but have firm, rules on their books that they do not engage with OTC companies. So to me, that it's helpful to understand why it's a kind of a priority or why they're taking their time to do that. It'll overall help the business get access to capital as well as just investors that have good, reputable histories behind them. So.
And isn't retail currently over 90% of ownership of the company right now?
Oh, it's 99. I mean, insider, you'd have to do overall issued shares minus insider ownership, right? Which I think sits at about 10% or 17%. I can't remember what they're sitting at. But yeah, retail, as far as the float's concerned, retail is definitely like 90+%. Institutional ownership as measured by the OTC market page is like a fraction of a percent. And it ebbs and flows.
And I think, there's so much opportunity there for institutional ownership. And when you look on the macro side, all the institutional money going into ESG, and, the institutional money tends to be hodlers, right? So these tend to be good long-term stable positions for the company. And I think that's a good signaling and sign of support to really get that. So really excited to see what happens there. I understand everyone who might be listening to this might be afraid of the whole potential possibility of a reverse split, right? So, there's a lot on the line. We'll see what happens. We personally don't have visibility into that ourselves. We can only really follow fundamental developments of the company as they're publicly announced. And when you look at the fundamental developments of this company, you see progress month over month, right? And when you look at progress, it disappoints in the short term and surprises in the long run, right? So really excited to see the plant getting built and to see black mass getting produced and eventually going from black mass to getting, cathode grade materials ready for different feedstock partners. Are we still?
I was going to say to your point about the reverse split, because anybody new to the stock, reverse split is, effectively they would take, like in a hypothetical where they needed 3, they could take 2 shares at $2 and whatever cents and make them worth, around 5, right? And so those historically have been done by companies that are failing to meet their market requirements and need to desperately change their share price to stay wherever they are, right? If you're on NASDAQ, you need to stay above a certain price. Your share price has fallen. You need to do a reverse split. And so at any rate, I'm not terribly concerned because I've found instances in which companies have done reverse splits in order to uplist. But the CFO, David Corso, he had put out in one of his presentations, the last presentation, that the company is not really, they're not planning on doing anything like that because they believe that they have some exciting announcements in the pipeline to justify or push them above any threshold that they would need. They meet just about every single requirement from a liquidity and volume and every other metric. So barring the share price, they don't seem to be sweating it. So if they're not sweating it, I'm not going to sweat it. But
yeah, and I don't sweat it because if we look at the landscape, folks, I mean, I think this is a good time to jump into probably the most important topic, which is our president and his 100-day supply chain strategic review.
Give me your take on it, supply chain guy.
My take on the supply chain guy, huh? All I can say is, let's just start from the top. Geopolitical climate, not good. Not good at all for supply chains. You have trade tensions running high everywhere. Your biggest supplier of a lot of these minerals are coming from China, which is not on good grounds with the US at the moment. And so this strategic review was so focused on the allies and what could be done in the US. And ABTC is prime position to take advantage of a lot of parts of it. And so let's start from the top. One, there is a strong focus on recycling. Biden wants really wants to create some kind of competitive supply chain in the US and with core allies for battery grade materials. Recycling has to be a component, right? There's just no way around it. You need to have a strong recycling program where there's ways to take feedstock, take old batteries, put it into these plants, extract them for all the valuable materials, and then push them out into manufacturers who can then create new batteries from them. Very few companies, as we talked about earlier, some of them can't even get a plant off the ground because residents and other local members of the community just don't like them. Others are just starting, and we and ABTC has a permit that vote coming up on June 16th that we hope lands them in great, keeps the momentum going, and they can get that plant off the ground, hopefully this year. In terms of topics to talk about, guys, hey, so what do recycling is a long-term game. First, you need a lot of old batteries in place. You need a lot of used batteries before recycling can take effect. Do we have that?
Yes, with an asterisk. I mean, it all depends on the process of the system, right? Can you take mixed feedstock of, laptops, phones, etc.? So I think what I'm most excited about this plan is A, the acknowledgement of recycling, and B, the acknowledgement that for recycling to be successful, we need to all be participating in some shared goal of designing battery packs in a way in which they can be recycled, keeping that in mind from the design standpoint, incentivizing and enforcing the return of batteries to re-enter that cyclical chain. And the government, I think, is going to go a long way to help ensure that. But yeah, from a feedstock perspective, if you're looking for the absolute cleanest, best feedstock, and you're just saying, I want to recycle nothing but GM Ultium batteries, that's a ways out.
How about the, EVs? Like, my take on this is the fact that EV sales are going to grow exponentially over the next decade. There's not enough mined lithium to support all those EV sales. You're going to have to get fresh lithium sources first. How about in terms of mining? Where are we going to get all those fresh sources of lithium?
Well, so the federal government, Biden's administration, had really pushed the battery technology angle when they were talking about their Buy American plan. And they were saying that they wanted to source everything American. And then within about, I want to say 2.5 months, they backed away from the battery metals and materials space for the Buy American plan. I think they still intend on kind of prioritizing America, but someone probably tapped them on the shoulder and said, there's absolutely no way you can source everything in America, or even potentially even a fraction of what you'll need from America. And in order to even get that fraction, you'll have to approve a lot of projects that might not be as clean or glamorous as you would like. So, you've got various different projects across the country that will consume, different amounts of sulfuric acid, produce different kinds of waste byproduct. And so realizing that, they then changed their tone with the battery metal space and said, okay, well, we'll probably source from friendly countries. So you're talking the Canadas, the Australias, and strengthen those relationships because, and rightfully so, they're going to need materials from those spaces in order to fuel the stationary storage and EV space. So yeah, I think that what they'll want in domestically, they'll still probably be, like we said, securing loans for research and development to allow for clean technology and clean extractions. So I think American Battery can profit there because that's what they're after, assuming you can get access to that capital without extreme expense. Because if it costs you money in order to get money, then they might have cheaper money available to them. But the federal government definitely seems keen in getting the American supply chain bolstered. Recycling will, and this was a part of my investment thesis from day one, was recycling will be so pivotal because you can take batteries that were manufactured, mined, and procured elsewhere and turn them into American materials by extraction. So you could potentially put yourself at the front of the line from a, selling to the government, stockpiles, et cetera. Whoever cares about buying American, you would be kind of at the top of the cream at the top. But yeah, it's going to be a rough couple of years, I think. We're already starting to see Tesla prices starting to creep up. I think that could partially have a little bit to do with battery supply chain stuff. It'll be challenging, though. I think companies will take hits on their profitability in order to keep cars economical. And I think when the government starts to subsidize cars more heavily with more incentives to consumers, I think
they'll
that
definitely do that.
I think OEMs are just going to raise the price $7,500. So I expect that there would be a cost share there. Cars won't maybe be as cheap as they are now.
Oh no! I mean, have you seen used car prices, buddy? Those things have gone up substantially. But hey, sorry, Ron, go.
And when you look at that, it's a common investment thesis. I am a Tesla investor since 2013, and I was looking at mining companies, right? And then from mining companies, eventually after doing months of research, I then landed on recycling as a similar investment thesis with Kyle in seeing, how you turn things into American, how it captures and locks supply chain in America, and how important that is for us strategically. It's not a matter of, is a lot of the money going to be funneled either to ABTC or to another recycling company in America? No, it's actually there's such a dire problem that the alternatives are sourcing it from other friendly countries, right? Or completely different alternative paths rather than just giving it to a competitor of ABTC. And it's a reflection that this is such a nascent space that really still needs to be developed, and something for everyone who watches this in the months and even years to come. If you see an announcement that an OEM has a deal with a recycling company, and if it's not ABTC, that doesn't mean they're not going to work with ABTC, right? It means that I see a future where these OEMs work with basically all the recycling companies to get feedstock and to get high volumes of it in order to meet their demands, because there's going to be such growing demands for it. And honestly, no recycling company in the industry has really proven themselves yet to really recycle 80% of the supply of recyclable material, right? There's no entity that has that level of throughput today. So there's going to be multiple winners. Everyone's going to partner with everyone. And just a disclaimer to people to not freak out if they see deals that come and the ABTC is not on the PR newswire in the year 2021, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, and the amount of tonnage that's going to be circulating is going to be so extreme. To your point, nobody currently has that capacity. And the name of the game will just be who can maintain the best margin, who can recycle for the least amount of money, and having an advantage, even if you don't have a feedstock agreement on day one or whatever. Like, those things will come in time, because the need for both the metals out the other end of the system, as well as the need for just recycling it. Like, these OEMs do not want to sit on car battery packs because they are a liability. They don't want the risk of, a Hummer EV gets in a car crash and compromises the pack. It's a salvage title. No one's going to want that sitting on their used car lot, or even scrappers won't want that sitting around, because it's a ticking time bomb in some respects when it's been compromised like that. So, it's in everybody's best interest to ensure that these things get routed quickly, expediently to a recycler, for,
and
all those reasons.
There's a couple of signals for how serious and how mature our market is for that, right? One is, how developed does that supply chain occur for those scrap batteries in whatever material form, right? It's okay to have some batteries of old laptops lying around in your house, but to have like a scrapped Hummer, that a dealer doesn't want to take on, a scrap yard like Waste Management doesn't want to take on, how does that get transported, right, to a recycling center? Are there any bills of legislation around the transportation of, batteries and how that works? Another one is looking at these bills for infrastructure spending around it, right? And if we look analogously, the Senate this week passed a $250 billion tech bill just for manufacturing locally for semiconductors and whatnot. And it shows this growing trend, whether it's in battery supply materials, whether it's in semiconductor materials, the U.S. trying to be more independent. That you see that at the top level of spending bills, and hopefully we start seeing it with more regulations and clarity of any ease of regulations in terms of how different people down the supply chain like ABTC can handle their operations and how they're able to overcome some of those logistical problems like storage and transportation.
And I was going to say, one of my favorite things about the conversation about where is the feedstock going to come from in the coming years, EVs will last a good amount of time. The batteries seem like the chemistry is now at a point where like these cars can go 100,000 miles or more, right? No questions asked. So it'll take a while, 10 years maybe, for a lot of these cars to want to re-enter the supply chain. But then I start thinking about how many cars get in car accidents every single year and get salvaged. And then on top of that, how many immature self-driving or assisted driving systems are going to be on the market that will result in cars flipping over and, crashing into each other? I expect that might actually be a reasonable, a non-zero kind of statistic. And, in the past, when you have an ICE vehicle that gets a salvage title, it'll get a salvage title for a number of reasons, none of which necessarily mean that it cannot keep driving. So you've got folks that will buy these cars and keep driving them. But I highly expect that if the battery in any way was compromised, the structural integrity of the battery pack has been compromised, it's probably going to be mandated that these things, or at least the pack itself, which at that point, if you lose the pack, who's going to buy the car without the pack and then have to source that? But at least the pack itself will need to be sent to a recycler. You're not going to repair a battery pack. I don't expect anyone would be willing to take on that liability if it bursts into flames when you're driving 70 miles an hour down the highway. So I do think that the supply chain will exist to get these cars back through the system when they've been damaged or obviously end of lifed. But
sorry, I was saying, Kevin.
No, you go first, because I was going to actually go on to move it slightly in a different direction.
All right. And I just want to say, when you see the growth of battery recycling in the next 3 to 4 years, that will definitely grow. But what's going to grow more than that is the growth in electric vehicle production. The growth in that area is greatly outpacing the growth in recycling, right? So, and, I think that's something to have people keep in mind. Again, every announcement out there doesn't necessarily have to be ABTC gets a feedstock deal with XYZ source, because it is a long game. The factory is not built yet. And I think a lot of news and serious discussions will happen once that's built. And everyone in this space, I think, is going to be a winner who has a legitimate, high profitable, high margin business in 2030, right? Are we still looking at plant by end of 2021?
From my understanding, we are. Definitely from my understanding, we are. We're looking at something to be produced by the end of 2021, actually.
Yeah. I mean, time will tell, right? You get the cup, but there's still other permitting hurdles to jump through. So I don't think it's premature to change that guidance. Their guidance that they gave was the end of 2021 to have produced something. There may still be things to finish on the plant, office spaces that haven't been furnished, or other things like that. Their focus is to get the thing operational. It's not to have conference rooms fully decored.
I think though, I brought up the supply chain because what I think I was most excited about was ABTC's extraction technology. Right. You're essentially taking components of recycling and what was so environmental friendly about the way ABTC was going about recycling, and taking components of that and applying it to extraction. Because at least in my mind, the next 2 to 5 years, extraction is the name of the game, since EV growth is going to outpace recycling growth. So for all the extra growth that comes in EV, you're going to have to get lithium somehow, and that's not coming from recycling.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll just be a time will tell. It all depends on what the recyclers are outputting. If they can meet the requirements of these, cathode precursor manufacturers and the cell manufacturers. I think scrap is definitely going to be a bidding war of sorts. Like, you know, recyclers would definitely want the scraps. For when you first bring on a cell manufacturing line, my understanding is that for every 10 cells that you produce, about 3 are defective. And that's both defective cells that come out of the end and fail QC, as well as just the scraps that are generated that you know, come from the process. And even over time, I think the best cell manufacturing lines are still around 10% material loss just due to scrap. So that is a overwhelmingly large amount of feedstock that folks will want. And I think over time, unless a lot of these recyclers scale, it'll even potentially outstrip some of the recyclers' capacity. So they could just focus exclusively on scrap for the foreseeable future. So you'll have some of these nuanced little subsections of recycling that some people may carve out for themselves. But yeah, it's too early to tell. This is still so early and so exciting, but nonetheless, there are a lot of unanswered questions about how it'll all shake out.
The devils are always in the details, right, Kyle?
Yeah, you're telling me. Yeah, so Li-Cycle announced back in May that they were partnering with the Ultium Cell joint venture. So that's not partnering explicitly with either LG or GM, but their joint venture that they are undertaking for cell manufacturing. So they created a JV for building the battery packs themselves. And Li-Cycle looks like will be recycling the scrap from one such facility. So they may be in geographical proximity, I believe, to make that worthwhile. But yeah, I'm skeptical when I read any of these things, just knowing the environmental permitting challenges. And so when I see people shake hands and say, we're going to recycle cells from this place, and especially if they're not in the same state, I just go, oh, well, maybe you can share with us how you intend on getting them from point A to point B, because that is non-trivial. That actually is more exciting if you can tell me that I can legally transfer this material across state lines. And I mean, we've seen instances even just in Nevada where, you know, folks announce, hey, we're going to recycle blank from blank, and then they get slapped on the wrist when it's like, you didn't get permission to do that. Like, you're actually going against the letter of the law. American Battery is working really, really hard to rewrite the letter of the law, because everyone admits that it's not suitable for 2021 into the 21st century. But until it is, you're still in violation. So, yeah, we're so early in this industry that even when people announce that they're going to recycle some OEM's scrap or whatever, even that is a little pragmatic or a little difficult to swallow, because there's a lot of unknowns about that. So
no, Kyle, and I want to add this, and for folks who have listened to our past episode about Li-Cycle, this announcement has you have to understand a few more things about this announcement. One, it's Li-Cycle getting feedstock from Ultima. Two, Li-Cycle is not going to be sending battery grade lithium back to Ultima. There is no mention of that, and it is impossible for them to do that right now. This is single-handedly a one-way flow of materials. Li-Cycle is going to take it. They're going to create black mass. They're going to sell it to one of their partners, who is then going to convert that black mass to some kind of other lithium-grade battery materials. And maybe that will get sold back to someone else, who then ultimately goes to Ultima. There are tons of other parties. This is just a one-way announcement. I think it's very important for folks to understand this is all it means is Li-Cycle is going to take these batteries, and they're not going to be furnishing it back to Ultima to recreate batteries. There's a whole mess of another portion of the ecosystem that still has to be stood up.
You got Nissan on your mind because you keep saying Ultima and it's Ultium.
So, Ultium. I do have Nissan on my mind because they did get a huge loan from the Department of Energy this last year. So I was reading about them as well. Man,
the only thing on my mind is a Plaid S.
What, and how many of those will end up getting scrapped when they sideswipe a car at 120 miles an hour on the highway?
People can't handle 0 to 60 in under 2 seconds, baby.
I expect a lot of those plaids will end up being recycled. That's a little bit too much car for your average person.
I guess we know where our feedstock's coming from then.
Yeah. But it depends on how many people can afford to buy them and how many of those enter into the supply chain in the first place. But yeah, and even that is kind of an interesting side note before we wrap up. You know, talking about Tesla had announced the Plaid and the Plaid S, or Plaid Plus, sorry, and the Plaid Plus was effectively canceled 1 week prior to the announcement. And one of the key differentiations between the normal Plaid that they are releasing and the one that they have at least postponed is the battery technology going into it. Their in-house battery manufacturing, the 4680, does not appear to be ready, or even if it were ready, they may not have capacity to support this product line when they have maybe earmarked some of those cells for the Model Y and the Cybertruck in Texas. So, but nonetheless, a lot of rumors swirling. Is Tesla ready to become a cell manufacturer on their own? Have they overcome their losses? Because I think one of the biggest problems was, yeah, we can manufacture battery cells, but if we're throwing away 4 or 5 out of every 10, that's not helping anybody. And then there's no one really equipped to recycle cells in any traditional or huge volume, especially if you're incurring losses in that area of 40 to 50%.
What's interesting to glean on that is everyone is playing a game of can their specs match Tesla specs, while Tesla is playing a game of how many cars can we sell with how few batteries we put into those cars, right? How few batteries can we get away with in each of these cars? Because they have the truck, the semi, and all of their Model Ys and everything coming out, and those all need batteries, and they're feeling it on their end. And when you're looking for both the primary mining and extraction of battery materials and the recycling of these materials, this is such a material topic that is currently affecting OEMs and in the future energy storage suppliers, right? You'll see excuses of we can't make this many cars because we can't get these batteries for it. And I think that's a common headline you'll see for the next 3 to 4 years until we see both mining, extraction, and recycling capabilities within the US in an eco-friendly way really start to scale up. So the story of ABTC is not a 2021 story. The story of ABTC is a 2025 story. And we're all here on the ground floor. And it's really exciting to be a part of this story when there's a lot of uncertainty around it and there's a lot of optimism and potential. And it's great, for all of us here to be OGs listening to this podcast right now.
Oh, I'm definitely optimistic.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the numbers are pretty straightforward to crunch, right?
Yeah. Supply.
You don't even need a calculator. You just look at it, you're like, yeah, it's going to work.
Well, yeah. I mean, when there's almost like a guaranteed buyer for everything that will enter your facility, there's more supply than you can probably ever process. You have the government, tailwinds. You got a lot of different stuff going on where it's if you can recycle batteries and you can do so with any modicum of profitability, you will be fine. I'm just gonna keep saying it. The growth of battery demand is outpacing the growth of recycling capability, right? So it's not ABTC against Li-Cycle. It's ABTC and Li-Cycle aggregately, can they handle the tidal wave that's coming? And that's a really exciting space to be in for all of us. I mean, when you look at it, with the battery demand, we're already looking at lithium mining is going to struggle to scale to meet that demand. Many of which are using like old legacy technologies of, evaporative ponds. So those, like, even if you get a new one stood up and pump a whole bunch of stuff into a field, it takes months for it to evaporate off and actually collect it.
A few years.
And you have to hope it doesn't rain.
Yeah, well, and the permitting of it and all that notwithstanding. So even just getting the supply side from the mining up and running is already problematic. But I do expect that we will see recyclers just struggling to scale fast enough. And so the ones that have the most efficient processes, where each of their facilities can handle potentially more than their competitors, that'll be advantageous for them and their customers. So yeah, this is a long game. I think that everybody watching The Wire and looking with bated breath, like it's exciting in the near term, but for me, this is like, I'm looking years down the road.
Oh yeah. And I want to add, folks, like it's not actually that hard of a game either. I mean, in terms of cost pressures, like if we even just remove and say demand's there and it's easy to bring mines online, it's expensive. And right now, with shipping the way it is and the supply chain disasters the way it is, it's actually even more expensive to ship lithium from overseas. Try getting an empty container ship that goes from Asia to the US. Good luck, unless you're paying 3 to 4x to 5x, maybe even 10x these days of what last year's prices are. Like,
and even the competitive risk, right? So let's just say that in a hypothetical universe, Li-Cycle announces that they have some new process and it's going to recycle batteries way cheaper than anyone in the world can do it. It won't matter because they won't be able to flood the market with a cheap commodity and change the price that other competitors are going to be charging, because there will be such a demand for these metals that, if anything, it benefits them. They can sell it for the same price that the market is selling at, and they'll just pocket the difference. But those price pressures won't be felt in the same way that we've seen in low demand markets with lithium, where China onlines new supply and can lower the price of things and put pressure on international entities to have to sell it uneconomically. I just don't see that happening. So yeah, it'll be like an incubator where there's very low risk for people to enter this space, because the demand will be so high for this service.
Demand is so high, supply is constrained, and China can't flood the market because they wouldn't want to be flooding the market since they want to hoard all the metals themselves anyway. Anything that goes in a country's borders these days will not be leaving it anymore.
Yeah. My favorite story is one with high demand and low supply, and being able to have customers for everything you produce. I think that's a familiar story for all of us here.
Oh yeah, that was Tesla's story, right? Like, high demand, low supply, and their inability to ramp up supply no matter what they did, because every time they did, there was more customers, and that's essentially what the story is, guys.
I just want to say shout out to the Morgan Stanley analyst in the year 2026 who's watching this podcast for due diligence. Shout out to you, buddy.
Not Goldman?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, give us a buy rating at $25.
Yeah. No.
Oh, wow. Okay. No, that's pretty much it, at least from my side, in terms of important topics and such to cover, since it's been a while. But I do hope to see all of you guys on the next call in 3 days, right?
June 26th, watch party, baby. Bring your Tesla tequilas. Let's go.
You mean 16th?
Well, I guess Ron's not showing up anymore.
So close.
Okay. It's all right, Ron. When we do our podcast on the 26th, we'll see his reaction. We'll be getting ready to drink, and we'll be like, "Hey, buddy, that was 10 days ago, right?" Okay.
All
Thanks,
right,
everyone.
well, that's a wrap. See ya.